Hello guys, welcome back. So to continue on the epistemology series, we're gonna start off with John Locke's empiricism. This is gonna be a bit of a long video, so get ready to get your brains milked. Alright, so John Locke's empiricism starts off and he says, the mind is a tabula rasa, which means blank sheet, right? In which experience writes on. And so there are no innate ideas. All knowledge comes from observation. And so Locke disagreed with Descartes on innate ideas, and he used Occam's razor to disprove Descartes, right? So Occam's razor is if you have two competing ideas to explain the same phenomenon, you should prefer the simpler one, or do not multiply entities beyond necessity, if I'm correct, if I remember correctly. But and so note that Locke's is a representative realist or indirect realist. And so he claims that humans do not directly perceive material objects, right? We do not directly perceive it or perceive a thing in itself if we're using Kantian terms. So, though material objects cause ideas to rise in the mind of humans, right? The ideas are representations of material objects, basically like copies, right? So, simple ideas are ideas that cannot be further analyzed or reduced into smaller components. They are basic, right? Remember when I said basic, they are self evident. Uniform ideas received directly through the senses. So, example, red code. And complex ideas include abstractions, ideas of relation, and compounds of simple ideas, like a unicorn. You put a horse and a horn together, and you get a unicorn. Yay! Right? And so complex ideas, which are, abstractions, could be like what, free will, unless, you're like a determinist, right? But abstractions, right? Basically abstract things. Think of platonic concepts, like numbers, right? Those are abstractions. Those are complex ideas. And so primary and secondary qualities. So primary qualities are qualities that exist in material objects themselves and they are independent of any observer. So these are actually properties or qualities of the object in themselves, right? So this includes shape, extension, position, and motion. They produce the exact same copies in every human mind because every human perception is the same towards them. That is what Locke claims. So second qualities are generated from the primary qualities of an object acting upon the human senses. They are in the mental representations of material objects that exist in the observer's mind. And they exist only in the mental copies of the material object. So this includes colors, sounds, taste, texture, and smells. And so thus, since they only exist in the mental representations, they differ from person to person. So they exist only in virtue to a person's experience. And so there's a problem with this, right? So it arises, it's called egocentric predicament. And it's basically the epistemological, um, what is it called? Problem that apparently a person can never get outside one's own mind because really all he can know is just what is present to his mind, basically, right? What is conscious to his mind. And so John Locke's attack on rationalism includes that if innate ideas or knowledge existed, they would be universal, meaning that everybody would know them. But yet, not everybody has the same ideas, right? And so Locke rejects the notion that an idea can exist in the mind unconsciously, right? And if we aren't aware of it, it's not in the mind. And so Locke objects to the ontological arguments from Descartes and other rationalists by saying that some cultures do not possess the idea of a theistic God, right? Contradicting universality. Like Descartes tried to establish the existence of a monotheistic God, while other, like let's say people in Asia believed in a polytheistic God. They do not have the same concept, so it's contradicting universality, which was a response to the poverty of stimulus argument by rationalists. And so Locke's alternative explanations are abstract ideas. They are derived through abstraction from repeated experiences or habit or custom. Yeah, just how basically Hume basically said how we get knowledge from causation, but I'm just applying it to here. For example, whiteness observed in milk, chalk, and snow. So complex ideas from simple ones are basically, Locke argues that even non-experienced ideas like a gold mountain are constructed from previously experienced simple ideas. Like when we talked about how a unicorn, is constructed from basic simple ideas. And so instinct versus knowledge. So innate desires, hunger, aren't innate knowledge because they lack conscious awareness or reasoning. And so Locke's dilemma for innate knowledge is that either innate knowledge is consciously known at birth or it's not known until later reflection. But if it's unconscious, it's not knowledge if we are unaware of it. If it's known through reflection, this implies capacity to learn rather than innate knowledge, which conflicts with rationalist views. And so here's Locke's response to the priority thesis. And so the priority thesis is just basically we know general principles like law of identity, law of non-contradiction, the law of excluded middle. Think of Aristotelian laws of thought first, and then apply them to particular knowledge, right? And so Locke's response is that we have knowledge of the particulars first. Locke claims that we know particulars, which is, for example, white is white, without relying on general maxims, because those general maxims are considered universals. So there's universals and particulars, right? And so and then he says self-evident claims. So basic propositions like white is white are immediately evident. Note that this differs from an analytic truth. This is a logical truth, right? Logical truths are different from analytic truths. And so they are immediately evident without prior knowledge of general principles. And so that's why he says we know the particulars first. And so the certainty of particulars. We cannot be more certain of general maxims than of self-evident truths about particulars. And so Locke says that knowledge in mathematics and morality, and so he argues that they are synthetic a prioris that exist in math and to some extent in moral truths, but however, he believes that moral knowledge lacks the certainty and precision found in mathematical proofs. And so Locke's definition of knowledge is basically as perceiving agreement or disagreement between ideas, which lends itself to an a priori reflection on ideas received through experience. And so Locke has two divisions of knowledge, or two types of knowledge. So first is what we know, and it includes identity or diversity, knowing that something is the same, white is white, a logical truth, or different, white is not black, which is analytically true. Oh wait, no, I'm sorry. I'm pretty sure that's a logical truth. Sorry. And so Locke considers this the most fundamental knowledge. And then relation, knowledge of necessary relationships such as mathematical relations, that 1 plus 1 equals 2. Excuse me. Locke denies that we can universally know contingent relations, and so he also says of the coexistence or necessary connection that knowing the properties of objects and how they coexist, for example, seeing that a specific piece of gold is both yellow and heavy. Locke thinks that we have a limited a priori knowledge of necessary connections between properties. And he says that we also know real existence, knowledge of existence of entities such as oneself, God, and material objects. He says that if we can be sure that we exist, then we can also be sure that God exists, right? And so this is Locke on a priori versus innate knowledge. So a priori knowledge, Locke says, is derived by reasoning from experience, but they're not innate. And innate knowledge misconception. Rationalists such as Leibniz or Descartes argue that we have unconscious. No, I'm sorry, not Descartes, but Leibniz specifically argued that we have unconscious innate knowledge. But Locke argues this only becomes conscious through reasoning, meaning it is learned rather than innate. And so the second type is how we know, right? That's the second type of knowledge, he says. And so intuitive knowledge, immediate self-evident truths such as identity, white is white. This is the highest degree of certainty, right? And demonstrative knowledge, which is knowledge that requires steps of reasoning to perceive a necessary connection, as in mathematical proofs, like I said, 1 plus 1 equals 2. Sensitive knowledge, knowledge that is gained from sensory experience, allowing us to know the properties and existence of material objects. Example, knowing that gold is yellow by observing it. This is the least certain form of knowledge. So, yes, empirical knowledge is less valuable than logical or fundamental knowledge, right? And so this Locke says there is limits to science and empiricism, right? And so there's a difference. There's a clarification on nominal essence and real essence, and basically he says because our knowledge is limited to nominal essence, right, which is just observable qualities used to classify objects. Our classifications, such as identifying certain objects as gold, are just based off of observed properties, right, rather than any necessary essence, right? So it's kind of like similar, well, not similar, but I'm trying to connect it to Plato, right? Because Plato argued that for something to be something, it must have an essence or a universal, like a cat, right? It can lose its legs, but it can still be a cat because of its essence. Thus, he says we do not see this essence; we only see the particular or the instantiation, basically. And so he says, yeah, we only see the properties, right? We don't see the literal essence. And so as a result, scientific claims are likely, right? They're probably true, but they're not certain, meaning that we cannot deduce properties of an object like gold's malleability, and a priori, right? And so science as probabilistic. For Locke, scientific knowledge about material objects is never absolute, but rather probable, right? The more frequently we observe that A is B, all observed gold being malleable, the more likely we can infer that it applies universally to A as B. However, this inference remains uncertain because it relies on experience, not a priori reasoning. So he's kind of like, well, he's not like David Hume, because David Hume absolutely just kind of destroys philosophy with the problem of induction, right? Which we will get into later, which is a very, very good video I should make. And so nominal essence is observable qualities used to classify objects versus real essence, fundamental properties, right? Highlighting that our classifications may not reflect true natural kinds. And so Locke on rational belief and knowledge. So Locke differentiates between knowledge, which is certain, knowledge is certain, and rational belief, which is probability based on evidence. Rational beliefs should be proportional to the strength of available evidence, right? So rational beliefs are not knowledge. Beliefs can be rational without certainty as long as they are based on what is probably true given the evidence. And so this is Locke on testimony. So he says testimony can provide like probable belief, but it's still not knowledge because it still lacks certainty. And so the credibility of testimony depends on factors like witness integrity, consistency, expertise, and number of witnesses, and alignment with prior knowledge. But he still believes that credible testimony, particularly if it aligns with past experience, it justifies rational belief, but not knowledge, so, right? So while Locke does allow the possibility that strong testimony, like miracles, right, can sometimes outweigh past experience, he remains cautious about its reliability. So stay skeptical, basically. And that's basically it. Thank you so much, guys.